Welcome to The Weekly. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Chris.
And this week on The Weekly, Symbaroum Starter Set and Savage Pathfinder.
I just saw that today on the walk over here, and I'm like, okay.
And for a topic, I thought we would talk a little bit about the D&D Singularity.
Okay.
So this is something that came up in an article by Death Trap Games.
So I see my unspoken yet adopted resolution of not talking about D&D in 2021 is just like out the fucking window.
Well, this will be a funny.
Okay.
It's a funny point that I think is, and it's probably something that all games are going to eventually have to deal with.
Is this like I forget the term now. You know how crabs have evolved multiple times from like different different lineages, and so there's this like fancy word that means to become crab form. Like if anything stays alive long enough, it eventually evolves into a crab. It's just like anything that stays alive, like any game that stays around long enough becomes D&D.
Yeah, right, exactly. Let's start with the starter set. So the Symbaroum Starter Set. So that's a free league, game, and it's a free league game from 2015.
Yeah, it's fairly old.
Yeah, so doing a starter set is interesting. They must have been having success with like the Alien Starter Set, and you know how they've been making those box sets that kind of get people into a world. And maybe this setting hasn't had enough attention. It's got a lot of support, like there's a lot of adventures, but it hasn't gotten a lot of maybe it's not as popular as they'd like it to be. So this starter set may get people into the world.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that point, but I saw it and said, oh, cool, starter set for a game that's not ancient by any means, but yeah, not new.
Right. I'm not sure if this was the first game, but I think it was the first game I noticed the Martin Grip artwork.
Okay.
You know, because that's really a big part of the feeling of it is dark nature fantasy, but his artwork really brings you into what that is. So the set is going to be the Treasure Hunts of Davokar. So the bundle will contain the core rulebook, an adventure compendium, and 2 published adventures to jumpstart your adventures, and then full color maps of the Amberin civilization, along with the wooded border, and also pre-made character sheets and a set of dice.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so they seem to be doing that a lot. I mean, that if you put the custom dice in there, that kind of takes the price up a bit. But
I wonder if I haven't looked at the dice. I wonder if they're custom dice, or if they're just kind of dice. Okay.
No, I think they are. I think they're the ones that and maybe they'd already produced them for a Kickstarter.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
That takes a little bit of the expense out. They're not like actually tooling these for the starter set. I didn't see, I think I heard a price point online, but of course I didn't write it down. They did a kind of an announcement on YouTube.
It might still be in pre-order.
Oh, right.
Because Trophy is kind of inspired by Symbaroum.
Oh, right.
The creator of Trophy, Jesse Ross, played Symbaroum, kind of realized like they loved like the atmosphere, didn't really care for the mechanics that much, which birthed Trophy.
Interesting.
And because of that, and because of how much I like Trophy, when I saw the starter set, I'm like, or the previous Bundle of Holding bundle.
Oh, yes.
I was like, all right, should I pick this up? If I did pick it up, it might only be for like setting and inspiration rather than any kind of system. But given how surprised I was at the Alien RPG, who knows, right? I might look at this and go, oh, I actually would run this.
Yeah.
So I'm highly considering it.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting you said that. I suspected that about Trophy because it has a similar feel, and nature is such a dominant part of it. So you're not, it's not grimdark. It's more like dark
nature
horror.
dark.
Yeah, nature dark. Yeah, like nature horror kind of. Yeah, it's more monstrous.
Someone needs to coin a new term for nature dark. Yeah.
Yes, nature dark. It's interesting. It's an interesting move, and I think we were already talking about how starter sets are really trying to. They're working hard to get new players, and it is a good way because you've got pre-generated characters to just get something out. A GM has to just read a thinned down, kind of stripped down rule set, and then you can get to playing to see if you like the setting and mechanics.
Yeah, and like I know experienced role players, or not I know, but I get the sense that experienced role players kind of like to make characters or a certain subset of them. And I understand that making a character is a good way as a player to kind of learn the system, or at least for me, but you have to know something about the system.
Yes.
To make informed choices, which means reading the book. And sometimes it's a lot better for, I think, publishers to just go, we've included kind of starter characters, play these. And then you'll learn how to play the game, and then you can make your own characters.
Yeah, and then you'll be able to kind of make an informed decision about, I don't like how fighters work in this, or magic is kind of weird. So yeah, I don't want to do that when I make a character. So you're doing kind of like a one-shot session. I'm like, well, what do we think about this, and what do you think about your characters?
Maybe that informed decision is, this game is not for me, in the extreme end. But hey,
put it back in that starter box. It's a nice surprise. So I'll put a link to that pre-order. Anybody that's been looking at that setting, this is a good way to try it out. So that would mean maybe Coriolis is the next one.
Maybe.
That was the only one that doesn't have a
I think they just finished a Kickstarter for some kind of adventure, or there was some pre-order. And that's not me being disparaging, but yeah.
But I've heard much more about that game from Free League than Symbaroum. So I think, I don't think that needs a starter set as much because it's gotten more attention. Well, Galorian comes crashing into the savage world.
Couldn't keep a straight face, could you? Nope, not with my expression.
It's a smile in my voice.
Perhaps it's a good thing this is an audio-only cast, so people can't see my expression on this. All right.
Yeah, so with the launch of a new Kickstarter, there is a amazing RPG crossover in the works. Yeah, so I don't understand the need for this, and I don't
money.
Well, yeah, besides money, but anybody that would play Pathfinder is playing it for that 3.5 flavor, right? They're not. So
no idea. The little bit, and I only just saw this today. The only little bit that I read was something about, Paizo saying, "Oh, people have already been kind of fan conversions and playing stuff," and I guess as someone who doesn't really care for Pathfinder or Savage Worlds, from like a mechanical standpoint, I know there are people who enjoy the lore of Glorantha. It's not Glorantha, wasn't it? Or I couldn't even tell
Glorian,
you what Glorian, whatever. That tells you how much I know about the Pathfinder setting.
Right.
I hadn't, as a person who's not a fan, I hadn't looked at it and hadn't really assumed there would be enough of a distinction to port it to a different system.
Right.
So that's why I kind of looked at that and went, To me, Pathfinder is that 3.5 adjacent mechanic, and Savage Worlds is the Savage Worlds mechanic, so it kind of seemed odd to me to mash two systems together or to port one system to another. But I think the why broaden their fan base.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, do you think it'll change? Because with Pathfinder being such a kind of classic fantasy RPG, Savage Worlds is more pulp, right? So I don't know the system. So is it more stripped down?
They're kind of, not to compare them, but I think Savage Worlds feels more pulp because of the lower difficulty number and therefore the sort of higher success rate of characters, and that encourages the characters and the players to play more pulpy. Right. I think, like way back in the day, going from Ubiquity, which is kind of Savage Worlds similar, and Vampire. I remember Chris saying these mechanics are essentially the same. It's a die pool system. I'm much less scared in Ubiquity because each die is a 50% chance of success, whereas in Vampire, it's like a 20%. And I thought about that for a long time, and that's what kind of informed my decision about, kind of systems matter and why one kind of feels pulpy and heroic and another one feels kind of grimdark, even when they're very similar. I don't know enough about Pathfinder to tell you what tone it is. Based on D&D, I imagine you're supposed to play heroic heroes who do heroic things in the name of heroism. That tried to cram in a lot of there. Which, I don't know what the success rate in general actions in there is. I do know you have like plus 20 modifiers to die roll, which in my opinion is kind of in extreme cases, but that seems rather silly to me.
Yeah, right. Why are you rolling that?
Yeah.
So they call Savage Worlds a flexible system that can transition from narrative theater of the mind to tactical combat crunch.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm surprised. It seems like there are a lot more Savage World conversions of things. So Savage Worlds is a free rule set. Can you get like a free PDF?
I don't know if it's free. I know you can definitely get free like one-page double-sided adventures, and that is, as much as I don't like the system, that is definitely a strength of Savage Worlds, where kind of like Fate or Ubiquity or Cortex Prime, you have one rule set and you can do pretty much anything with it. It's going to be the same flavor, right? Because the mechanics don't change, but they have a lot of, not source books, but a lot of different kind of like setting books that are, like sci-fi, fantasy, kind of generic-y stuff. And I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but they do have a lot of kind of standalone games that use the Savage Worlds system. Yeah, I've seen that. And I think the creator of Savage Worlds also did Deadlands. Yes. So which is why in Savage Worlds, when you look at Deadlands, the poker hand initiative mechanic makes a lot more sense for Deadlands than it does for Savage Worlds. I'm not saying it's bad. You just go, oh,
yeah, right.
Wild West, poker hand, got it. Well, in Savage Worlds, it was, why are we now suddenly using cards?
Yeah, so we'll see. And I noticed there's a Savage Worlds conversion, like an official conversion by Modifius for the Mutant Chronicles RPG.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah, so I was curious about that because I think the kind of whole point, or the 2D20 is what I thought worked well with that system, but maybe a Savage World conversion is...
Well, again, as someone who frequently tinkers around with converting one setting to another system and stuff, you do that because, hey, this system does something I like, or has a feel that I like, and increasing the number of either fan or official conversions or supplements that allow you to do that just gets kind of more people on board with your setting, so...
Yeah, no, that's true. I think, it can't hurt bringing in people because, the setting for Mutant Chronicles is really fun. They give you such a diversity of types of things you can play, types of campaigns. So, yeah, if you like a Savage World system better, then...
How much diversity do you have in, like, stomping necromutants? I'm just curious. That's, like, basically all you do.
But, I mean, it goes from, like, kind of detective investigation to actually, like, fighting demons and, going through portals into...
I wonder what the gradient between those two things are, because they kind of act like a binary, in my opinion.
This Kickstarter will give you a 256-page hardback book with all the new class edges, magic items, and explain the setting, the world of Golarion. So you don't need the Savage Worlds Adventure Edition because it is... A streamlined version is included. Okay. Yeah, is included in the book. So that's a good idea. So and they're also going to do a hardback Pathfinder for Savage Worlds Bestiary, a GM screen, and converted classic atmospheric adventure, Hollow's Last Hope. Okay.
So as opposed to like a trio of books, you have a duo.
Yeah, and there's and it looked a little pricey. I took a glance.
They're hardback books, so
and I was like, okay, well, that's you can't really preview. I'm sure there's a digital edition as well, but hopefully they're going to put some love into the creation because they weren't cheap. So,
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know what the price is. I'm imagining like something like $50, $60 per book.
Right.
That's the average cost of a hardback book. So I'm certainly not saying it's not worth the money if you're interested in the game.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like Cyberpunk Red. I look at it and went, not an unreasonable price, not for me.
Right.
I'm not $50 interested. Yeah.
Well, I thought we would talk a little bit today about something I saw in an article online, and then that was touched on by a few other YouTubers. That was called the D&D Singularity.
Okay.
So this all, I think, was inspired, the conversation was inspired by Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Okay. And talking about options are starting to be homogenized. Okay. And that eventually everyone's character is going to look exactly the same.
I don't know if I agree with that assumption, but
be very similar.
Okay, I'll continue.
So we're moving toward a D&D Singularity where every character is essentially the same furry, battle-ready spellcaster that can do almost everything and has little or no flavor beyond the 8 pages of backstory that the player brings to the table.
I'm already assuming this person is very angry about the changes, and that is coloring their argument. Okay.
Right, yeah. No, I think the people that I've seen discussing there are more OSR, or more kind of classic.
Okay, well, that tells me all I need to know about this discussion then.
Yes. But it's the, and it's also the, I guess, the incursion. So, and here you go. This kind of tips his hand, right? However, I think that speculating what 6th edition will look like based on Tasha's hideous cauldron. Yeah, so there we go.
Were the italics yours or theirs?
They were theirs.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The funniest thing that I thought was what will shape the future of Dungeons and Dragons is the critters.
I don't think I disagree with that statement.
Here's kind of points that they're saying we're going to see in the future, and this is all kind of a symptom of what's happening to how people want to play, or how people are shown, like how people are shown the hobby, and that's how they approach it. So further simplification of the rules. Combat will continue to become less lethal and less the focus of the game.
What edition of D&D do they play if they think combat's not lethal? Anyway, sorry, continue.
Characters will become more super heroic.
Again, what version of D&D were you playing? Sorry, yeah.
And the characters will become something of a focal point for marketing, so miniatures and other services,
Have you missed all the previous stuff? Anyway.
And characters will be conceptualized more as a personal expression of the player than as playing pieces. It's just something that you're moving around in the world.
What era of role-playing is this person from? Or do they prefer? And you know what? I shouldn't say that because different people have different preferences, and however you want to play is totally fine as long as you're not crapping on other people's fun, which sorry, I tend to do a lot and I'm trying to get better about in 2021. Please ignore all that stuff I said about Pathfinder and Savage Worlds about 5 minutes ago. Anyway, I think maybe the end result of Critters are going to shape 6th edition, I tend to agree with, because as you said, that's been a lot of people's introduction to the hobby, Critical Role, and how they present that and how they play. And as I don't really play D&D and don't really watch Critical Role, I wonder if people's sort of who are coming into the hobby after seeing Critical Role going, the rules aren't really doing what I thought they were going to do, given what Critical Role does. Right. And if it doesn't, if that's the experience a lot of people are getting, then I think Hasbro and WotC would be smart to make the game do that, right? Like, make the game more like what they play on Critical Role if you're getting a huge influx of people who expect the game to be like that. Right. And I say that from like a business standpoint, and to the people who don't like that style of play, like that massive change from 3 to 4 to 5, the game you enjoy playing is still there. It didn't go away. Hasbro's not going to come steal your books and lock them up, and you'll never be able to play it again. So it sounds callous, but like either adapt or just continue to play your old stuff. And I highly doubt there will never be a secondary or third market for 5th edition if 6th edition is a radical departure from the rules. Like, it spawned Paizo, which we were just talking about. Self-publishing. There's going to be any number of people who want to stick to a previous rule set. The huge OSR, resurgence we've seen in recent years, that can all happen again.
There's something that happened with 5e and kind of the huge adoption of it, and I guess maybe more of its like kind of public visibility. Yeah, so it became much more visible, and you had a lot of people that aren't looking at it in context of a history of development of RPGs and just like, oh, this is what we do in this game and let's play this game, as if you're opening a box of a board game. This is what we do. At the same time, I think Wizards wanted 5e to kind of please both, return to form and please two audiences. And so that's when I think they're going to be running into trouble, because there's probably still people that are like kind of OSR people that are like, yeah, 5e we can make, because there's like a hardcore mode for 5e that basically turns it into more of an OSR, more of a deadly OSR experience. But there's more, theater of the mind. I want to play a cat girl that, so that, people that have come to it with that kind of thinking. So they do have kind of two audiences now, and it's going to be weird for them. It's going to be weird to see who, if they can't take care of both equally.
No, I agree.
So they might have to do literally like a, classic Coke.
Yeah, they might.
Coke kind of thing.
Because I was thinking about, like, I actually forget what version of D&D I started role-playing with, but there was like a basic and an expert set, wasn't there? Like, so for a time, there was kind of like two ways to play. I mean, they perhaps were not as different as we are currently talking about, but I agree that Wizards and Hasbro cannot attempt to please those two groups simultaneously and have something that's, commercially successful or that people don't complain about. And they might actually do better to say, here's like 6e tactical mode and here's 6e narrative mode. And there are some things shared between them, but if you want that dungeon crawly tactical, there are pieces on a table, play tactical. If you want the kind of what they're doing on Critical Role, play narrative, or whatever they want to name it. Right? They might do that, they might not, or just say whatever your biggest market share is, market to them. Right? And sorry, tactical 5e people, go join the ignored OSR crowd,
Yeah. So we'll see. And I think, but this was an interesting reaction, and I'm surprised how many people picked up on it as this Tasha's Cauldron release means this, means this for the future of D&D. And I don't know.
Do you think it's because they I believe Tasha's Cauldron of Everything decoupled race and ability score modifiers?
Yeah, and I think it just made, so maybe people are seeing that because now you can come with your own kind of character, culture, species, anything.
Hasn't that kind of always been the case? Okay. Sorry.
Well, I don't know, but then they can't market it. Yeah, so, but it's an interesting thing is, because if it's not an established...
But they could. Sorry, I totally cut you off there, but I think they could market it. As someone who doesn't really care for D&D, but understands why they decoupled race and ability score modifiers and culture stuff to try and get rid of some of the bioessentialism in D&D. And as someone who still thinks they're like light years behind where they need to be in terms of like representation, they could still have iconics in the Pathfinder sense by saying, in this setting, this kind of species tends to have this culture, and here are our iconic characters that are this species and this culture, and that's just what they are, and that's what we've paired mechanically, rather than, I mean, I don't think you could say, oh, we can't do anything because everything's decoupled. You just say, no, in this world, in this setting, these are the pairings between these two things, and here are your iconic characters. All that said, I think the people who are upset about the decoupling, I'm going to, like usual, maybe because of a lot of people here, I don't really think you have to listen to those people, because whether they kind of understand it or not, the decoupling, as I said, was a way to try and improve diversity of representation and get rid of that bioessentialism in D&D. And if people have that knee-jerk reaction of, oh, but they were always this way, and like even if they don't get it, I would tend to think you don't and probably shouldn't listen to those people.
I'm wondering though, if we're getting, like when we had the talk about alignment, if we're getting to the point where, you know, we're really going to figure out what Dungeons and Dragons is, and as things start, like if you take, you know, elf, dwarf, you know,
orc,
or
kobold, whatever,
there's so many D&D races now.
And the half things are just a whole mess. Anyway, sorry,
So what is D&D? What is it going to remain? How will it remain identifiable as that system? And, you know, there's going to be people aging out of the hobby. So I think a lot of the people that have a lot of strict and are kind of, you know, doing more gatekeeping and kind of strict thinking about what this needs to be. And we'll see how Wizards or whoever owns D&D reacts to that in the future.
No, that's a good point. And kind of like we had discussed before when talking about like Warhammer 40K, and how I said, I don't know what Warhammer 40K would look like if you took out like the eugenics and the genocide and stuff like. And it's, I think it's the same thing with D&D. I mean, what is D&D? You're going to someone else's home or land, murdering them because someone has decided they are bad, and taking their stuff, right? Like, if you take out the dungeon delving, if you take out like the combat encounters, I honestly do not know what of D&D is left. Right?
Basically have Second Life, like playing Second Life at the table.
Maybe. I don't know, like with some magic, I guess, right? But I think like about alignment, like you can and probably should shift to the alignment is individual choice rather than this racial characteristic, which ends up being real problematic. And why are we fighting these people? Oh, we're fighting these people because they have done bad things, rather than they are people who are bad. You know, that kind of came out wrong. But these people are bad because of the things they have done rather than who they are.
Yeah. Did you see the spider lady they worship? They must be.
I got no problem with that. Yeah, like that that 5e game we played. Like, we were fighting the drow because they'd locked us up, not because they were drow, right? Basically, that's...
Well, that was my character's motivation. It was
my character's motivation was to just get all their stuff back, and which wasn't happening. No, I guess slight tangent, but I think you can kind of fix alignment. I don't know how you would fix the take their stuff after you kill these people, and if you remove that, what of D&D do you have? Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, the dungeon delving is becomes so integral part of that. So you socialize and you kind of negotiate and you do all that to get your sponsorship to go raid a dungeon. So that's a good point. So we'll see where things are going, and we'll see how people complain about it and who they listen to. That'll be an interesting thing. Is whoever's in charge of D&D, how they're going to mitigate that and try to balance conflicting opinions, and as well as keep the
if they're going to try to, because I think as someone who participated in those initial 5e surveys, I don't think design by committee from my personal perspective isn't that great. But I understand why a business would want to do it, because you're trying to appeal to the broadest player base possible. But based on how people are kind of, I guess in my circles, talking about how D&D ain't that great because of that design by committee, I don't know if they should do it again. Or at least listen to us like a subset of people rather than everybody. Or I guess maybe don't try and please everybody, because you're not going to.
Right. Yeah, you're just going to have to admit. And I think a lot of IPs and things are kind of getting to that point where they're just like, we're moving into the future. And I've seen that in Japan with a few like Gundam, as basically they're trying to evolve. Like there are so many like 40 and 50-year-olds that watch that as teenagers that are obsessed with that, and they freeze anytime they see that on a video screen and just stare blankly at it and remember the old days. And they're trying to update it. They're trying to bring new, younger people into the hobby, and it's just not, because they're dumbing it down and they're cutie, they're making it cute.
So they're de-aging the protagonist even farther. Like, how long until we have like 2-year-olds piloting Gundams?
Well, it's getting close. It's like elementary school, like age kids. It's really getting ridiculous, and it's not even like a sci-fi world anymore. It's they're playing in some alternate world where they are controlling these robots. So it's just like they're playing an MMO in the anime. Yeah, it's like,
but I mean, like I kind of said before, Bandai has not come and burned the masters of those things, right?
True.
Like,
and
the media you like still exists,
right?
So
and they'll still release it on these like $500 box sets.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and those 50-year-old salarymen have the income to buy it, right? So there you go.
Yeah, and that's the thing too is D&D. That's an interesting point, because D&D is so, they want you to bling out everything. They release a new setting. It's like, here's the dice, and here's the pre-painted minis, and here's the DM screen, and
nerds, myself included, have that collectionist impulse that says, gotta have that.
Yeah. So we will see the future. So we'll see if we're all going to be playing furries, magic using furries in the future.
I kind of don't really. Hey, nothing against it. I kind of don't get playing furries.
You leave your persona at home when you tabletop game?
I'm not dignifying that with a response.
All right. Well, where can people find you?
On Twitter, as always. That's Hivemind, HYVEMYND. Lots of people spell it with I's, but it's with 2 Y's. But, yeah, what am I talking about currently? I don't even really remember. Probably talking about D&D.
Well, now you can talk about the Savage Worlds conversion of Pathfinder.
And how about you?
I'm doing lots of things now. Jeez, oh man. So yeah, I've got the Abusecartoons.com for the weekly cartoons, and I'm doing short stories that I've converted into AI-read audiobooks.
Yes.
So if you go to, I'll put a link to the podcast subscription, but Nmity Corp, so Nmity Corp is the website, and so I'm doing both a YouTube channel with audio and just the thumbnail, and then a podcast subscription as well.
I've listened to some of them.
Yes,
some of the initial ones.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I even read the originals. Those are really cool. Yeah,
cool. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll see how long I can keep up a weekly schedule of short
it's grueling.
Oh, and also the sixth part. Can I even say that? The 6th part of the Mutant Chronicles, Complete Mutant Chronicles, is out. This is the Rise of Cybertronic, and as a request from one of the patrons, I divided it because I spilled the beans. There's a little kind of heretical, too much knowledge in my original. I wanted to tell that story. I loved that story. But the kind of Duran brothers, their operating behind the scenes needs to stay more invisible. Okay. I think for players, GMs know that, but players shouldn't. And a lot of groups are using these videos to kind of give the setting for the players.
That's really cool. As someone who spent like an hour in that Death Watch game going through the 40K setting for people who didn't really know what it was, it would have been real helpful to just go, watch this. Right. All right.
And John still thought he was playing the Baltimore Colts. So, so that is out, and there are 2 versions. So if you are a player and you don't want anything spoiled, there is a spoiler-free edition. And then there's, if you want to find out like what really happened and what the true origin of Cybertronic is, you can read the blasphemous heretical edition.
Sorry, I was laughing through that whole bit, thinking about how the Ultramarine symbol does look like a horseshoe.
Right.
And you could be excused for thinking that the Ultramarines are some kind of super buff sci-fi brony.
Yes.
Now I want to do a whole chapter of Marines that just has like fucking cutie marks on their shoulder pad.
I'm searching that right now. I'm searching.
Oh, it exists. It exists. I know it exists. Yeah.
All right.
What's your chapter? Twilight Sparkle.
Pony up those Space Marines. All right. So that's it for this week. We'll be back next week.
Later, mortals.
Bye.